Welcome back to Color of Life. I'm so glad you're here today. Have you ever wondered why so many near-death experiences begin in hospital beds? In those quiet nights, as machines beep and families whisper prayers, countless patients report visions of light, angels, and even glimpses of eternity. A hospital bed may look ordinary, but for many it becomes a gateway where the body rests on earth, yet the soul leans toward heaven. In that fragile space, Judgment Day feels closer, and the mystery of life and death becomes undeniable. In this video, we'll uncover why hospitals often become thresholds between worlds and what these stories reveal about prophecy. Stay with us to the end, and let's talk together. Do you believe hospital beds can truly open into the unseen? Share your thoughts in the comments. We're building this conversation with you. Hospitals are often seen only as places of treatment, but they also carry a sacred weight where countless lives begin and end. The hospital bed, in particular, becomes more than furniture. It becomes a stage where eternity draws near. Let's now move deeper into these hidden stories and uncover what they mean for Judgment Day. The hospital bed as a sacred threshold. The story of Michael. Michael was a middle-aged father from Ohio who entered the hospital after a sudden heart attack. Doctors rushed to stabilize him, but as his body lay motionless on the hospital bed, something extraordinary happened. Michael later shared that he felt the bed beneath him dissolve into light, as if the mattress itself had become a bridge. He saw doctors and nurses moving frantically around his body, but in that same moment, he sensed another realm opening. For him, the hospital bed was no longer just furniture in a sterile room. It became what he called a sacred threshold. The rails of the bed felt like the edges of a doorway, and beyond them stretched an overwhelming brilliance. He described hearing a voice telling him, "You are standing between two worlds. Your choice here matters for eternity." Stories like Michael's remind us that hospitals, often dismissed as cold and clinical, are also the very places where souls are tested. The beeping of machines marks more than vital signs. It echoes the ticking clock of eternal decisions. In the prophecy of Judgment Day, these moments on the hospital bed reflect a spiritual courtroom where the destiny of a soul is weighed. Michael survived, returning to his family with a renewed sense of faith. And his story gives us a powerful reminder. What may appear to be just another hospital bed can, in reality, become a gate between life and eternity. Doctors witness the unexplainable. The story of Dr. Harris. Dr. Emily Harris, an emergency physician in Texas, had seen thousands of patients pass through her care. But one night in the ICU, she experienced something that challenged everything she believed about medicine. A patient, declared clinically dead for several minutes, suddenly opened his eyes and whispered, "The bed was a bridge of light. I wasn't supposed to return, but I was sent back." Dr. Harris admitted that nothing in her training could account for what she had witnessed. She had pronounced many patients before, but this time she felt the atmosphere shift. She later described it as if the hospital room itself grew still, like time paused while something greater decided the patient's fate. Her colleagues dismissed it as stress or coincidence, but Dr. Harris couldn't forget the patient's words. That bed, she thought, had become something more than steel and sheets. It had become a crossing point. She even confessed privately to her husband, "For a moment, I felt I was standing in a courtroom where heaven and earth meet." The prophecy of Judgment Day speaks of a time when souls will be weighed, and Dr. Harris believed she had glimpsed that reality. Though science demanded she remain skeptical, her heart carried the conviction that she had seen a fragment of eternity. Her testimony resonates with many who wonder if hospital beds are more than medical tools. For some, like Dr. Harris's patient, they are the very platforms where divine decisions are made, where the unseen world breaks through into the everyday. Families at the bedside. The story of Anna. Anna, a mother of 3 from California, sat beside her father's hospital bed during his final hours. Machines hummed, nurses checked vitals, and silence filled the room between beeps. Yet Anna insists something else happened that night, something she can never forget. Her father, weak and barely conscious, suddenly lifted his hand toward the ceiling. His eyes widened as if he saw a light no one else could see. In a faint whisper, he told Anna, "This bed is not the end. It's the doorway." Moments later, he slipped into unconsciousness, and eventually, he passed. For Anna, that moment transformed her grief into awe. She later shared, "I thought the hospital was just where people either got better or died, but I realized it was more. That bed became a sacred bridge. I could feel the air in the room shift, like heaven was near." Her testimony mirrors countless others who sit with loved ones in their final hours. The hospital bed becomes a stage where the unseen and the eternal intersect. For families like Anna's, these moments are not only heartbreaking, but also prophetic. They echo the words of Scripture that speak of every soul facing its appointed time. Through Anna's story, we see how ordinary families experience extraordinary glimpses of eternity. For them, the hospital bed is not just a medical object. It is a signpost reminding us that life here is temporary and that every soul is moving toward its ultimate judgment. Nurses on the night shift. The story of Sarah. Sarah had been a night shift nurse in a New York hospital for nearly 20 years. She thought she had seen everything: codes, recoveries, goodbyes. But she admitted that the most unforgettable moments were not found in textbooks. One evening, she cared for an elderly man whose condition was failing. His monitors showed the slow rhythm of a fading heart. Suddenly, he turned his head toward Sarah and whispered, "You're standing at the gate with me. This bed, it's not just a bed." Moments later, the monitors flatlined. Sarah recalled how the room felt different. She said, "It was as if the whole ward paused, like something larger was present. I couldn't explain it medically, but I knew I was watching a soul cross a threshold." After years in healthcare, Sarah confided that she now sees each hospital bed differently. She no longer views it as just a clinical station. Instead, she calls it a bridge where time and eternity touch. She even began to pray quietly for her patients, recognizing the sacred weight of their final moments. Her perspective ties directly into the prophecy of Judgment Day. Every person will face a moment of reckoning, and for many, that moment happens right there in a hospital bed. Sarah's story gives us a glimpse into how even seasoned professionals feel the nearness of eternity. For those who listen, it is not simply a nurse's anecdote. It is a testimony that reinforces the truth that hospital beds can indeed become gates between worlds. If you're still here with us, thank you for staying on this journey. These stories are not easy to hear, yet they open our eyes to truths we cannot ignore. Every hospital bed we've spoken about is more than a place of suffering. It is a glimpse of eternity. Before we continue, I'd love to hear your perspective. Have you ever witnessed a moment in a hospital that felt sacred? Share it below, and let's build this circle of voices together. A child's innocent vision. The story of Daniel. Daniel was only 8 years old when he was rushed into a Chicago hospital with a severe asthma attack. His parents stood by in fear as the doctors worked frantically to stabilize him. At one point, Daniel's heart stopped. He was clinically gone for nearly 2 minutes. Yet what he later told his family stunned everyone. When Daniel woke up, still weak and fragile in the hospital bed, he whispered, "I saw a garden. The bed turned into a bridge, and I walked across it. There were angels waiting." His words were simple, but the conviction in his small voice carried a weight his parents could not dismiss. Children often speak without the filters of adults, and Daniel's description was clear. He said the hospital bed felt like it lifted him, almost floating, carrying him to a place that was brighter than anything he had ever seen. When asked if he was afraid, Daniel shook his head and replied, "No, I felt safe, like someone was holding my hand." His parents, once skeptical of such stories, became believers that night. For them, the hospital was no longer just a building of medicine and machines. It was a place where eternity could break through, even in the fragile body of a child. Daniel's testimony reminds us of the words of prophecy, that the innocence of children often reveals truths adults overlook. His story reinforces that hospital beds can indeed become gates between worlds, even for the youngest among us. A pastor's midnight visit. The story of Reverend Thomas. Reverend Thomas was often called to the hospital late at night to pray with patients in their final hours. One evening in Dallas, he was summoned to the bedside of a woman who had slipped into a coma. Her family gathered, holding hands, uncertain if she would survive the night. As Thomas placed his hand on hers and began to pray, the room seemed to grow still. He later recalled, "It wasn't just silence. It was as if the entire ward paused. The hospital bed beneath her felt like the center of a great decision." Moments later, the woman stirred and whispered faintly, "I was standing before a gate of light. The bed lifted me to it, but I was sent back." Her family wept with relief, convinced they had witnessed a miracle. For Reverend Thomas, it was confirmation of what Scripture already foretold, that life's final battles are often fought in hidden places, where heaven leans close to earth. After that night, Thomas often told his congregation, "A hospital bed may look ordinary, but I have seen it become the doorway to eternity. Do not fear it. Instead, be ready." His testimony adds a spiritual weight to the prophecy of Judgment Day. Hospitals are not only centers of healing, they are sacred thresholds where souls stand between time and eternity. And pastors like Thomas remind us that even in the darkest nights, divine light can break through the walls of a hospital room. When skepticism collides with eternity, the story of Dr. Miller, Dr. Jonathan Miller, an accomplished surgeon in Boston, had spent most of his life convinced that faith was nothing more than comfort for the weak. Raised without religion, he believed only in science, evidence, and what could be measured. Yet one night, During a late emergency surgery, his perspective shifted forever. A patient's heart suddenly stopped on the table. For several minutes, the team fought to revive him. Finally, with one last shock, the heart resumed. When the patient awoke hours later in recovery, he looked at Dr. Miller and whispered with tears in his eyes, "I saw the gate. The bed lifted me to it, but I was told I had more to do." Dr. Miller brushed it off as hallucination until the patient began describing details of the operating room he could not possibly have seen while unconscious. The exact words of the nurses, the angle of Miller's hands, even the song faintly playing from a radio down the hall. Shaken, Dr. Miller admitted privately, "I had no category for this. It was as if I had touched something outside of time." That night, he walked out of the hospital not as a skeptic, but as a man haunted by eternity. Stories like Miller's highlight that even the most rational minds cannot escape the mystery of Judgment Day. The hospital bed had become, before his eyes, a gate between worlds, forcing him to confront that life is more than science and destiny more than chance. A life transformed. The story of Maria. Maria, a 42-year-old mother from Florida, entered the hospital with severe complications from pneumonia. For days, she hovered between life and death, her body fragile on the hospital bed. On the fourth night, she slipped into what doctors called a critical shutdown. Yet what she experienced in those hours would forever change her life. Maria later shared, "I felt myself rise above the bed, but I wasn't afraid. The bed became a bridge of light carrying me toward a brilliant gate. I heard a voice, 'It's not your time. Go back and live differently.'" When she awoke, her doctors were astonished. They had expected the worst. Instead, Maria opened her eyes with a calm smile and asked for a Bible. She told her family she no longer feared death because she had seen what lay beyond. From that day, Maria's priorities shifted. She left her corporate career, began volunteering at a local hospice, and told anyone who would listen, "That hospital bed was my judgment day. I was given a second chance, and I'll never waste it." Her testimony closes the circle of these stories. Doctors, nurses, families, even skeptics use and bear witness that hospital beds can become gates between worlds. Maria's life reminds us that such encounters are not just visions. They are calls to transformation. We've walked through powerful testimonies. A father who saw his bed dissolve into light. A doctor who could not explain what he witnessed. A nurse who felt eternity enter her ward. A child whose innocence revealed heaven's garden. A pastor who stood beside a sacred threshold. A skeptic transformed, and Maria, whose life was completely redirected. Each story points to the same truth. Hospital beds are not only places of suffering, they are gates where eternity draws near. The prophecy of Judgment Day teaches us that every soul will face its moment before the throne. For many, that moment begins not in a grand cathedral, but in a quiet hospital room. The steady beep of monitors, the prayers of families, the silence of midnight, these become the sounds of eternity knocking. What should this mean for us today? It means preparation cannot wait until the final breath. We are called to live ready, ready in faith, ready in love, ready in hope. The hospital bed may be the last threshold, but every choice we make now builds the path toward that day. So let me ask you, how would you live if you knew your hospital bed might become the gate to eternity? Would you forgive quicker, love deeper, pray stronger? These stories are not meant to frighten, but to awaken us. Thank you for journeying through these testimonies with us. Before you leave, I invite you to share your own reflections in the comments. Has your family ever experienced a moment in a hospital that felt sacred or otherworldly? Your voice may give courage to someone else searching for meaning. And if this message spoke to you, pass it on. Share it as a gift of faith. Subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. And let's keep this conversation alive together.